welcome to my sparkly channel. It is a Thursday, May 9th. Like and subscribe or never come back, because that's what I would like to do also. There is best today. You are not staying with me unless you're part of my day of service group. You'll be going to wherever your day of service location is so they can give you last minute information to get you ready for tomorrow. And then tie game was Star Wars because last Saturday was our Star Wars day. But we didn't have anyone in this class who got points, so it's not really that much of an issue. And then from there, again, I'll be going to the Costco place to pick up candy and stuff like that. So this is last year's. I do not know if this is what they're going to have again this year. It just depends on what they have in stock, but at least let you know what last year's was. Once I get things, then I'll give you guys the chance to spend points next week. And then down here, you are correct, those are over the 50 points, but it's also not candy. It's a thing that you only get to buy one time, and that does not count towards your 50 points. And then we kicked out the 3 kids taking the tests. We're going to go there. And let's see, how far did we get with you guys?
Pretty far.
Page 14.
Yeah, definitely in this class.
Page 15.
Definitely sounds long.
Can I still be shoes more?
You look like a battle with your hair.
Today was the last day
Yep.
you imbecile.
Quiet down, Anthony.
Sure, quiet down, boy.
Okay, I'm quiet.
Could be. I don't know.
There's 7 points in here.
Let's see. So we got through our undercover cop. What is the $3 beating equivalent to?
30 Cokes.
60 to $90.
There you go. Close to $60 to $90
Dang.
was.
I'll fool.
If you think Cokes are even more expensive than like $4, it goes up to like $120. And then we had our hippies, which we're gonna get to. Ooh, have we gotten to the character that's the hippie yet? In the story?
Eminem.
You guys. Brian, who's the big guy in the middle, who's adorable. We're gonna find out he's also a liar. And he does look like the Saint Bernard puppy. His friend is the scary one, who's all blonde. And this was Eminem, who was
Reading choice.
And then we got to
Yeah, we did.
Did we get to this part?
Yeah.
Ooh. So when we talked about him going around barefoot until his dad made him put on moccasins, it reminded me of this. Have you guys ever seen like these signs in restaurants when you go in? It says like no shirt, no shoes, no service. If you've ever noticed these in restaurants, these were because of hippies who didn't wear shoes. They couldn't put a sign on their door that just said no hippies. So instead, since hippies normally went around with their dogs out, they came up with signs that said no shirt, no shoes, no service, because a lot of times the guy hippies would go around without shirts on and just wearing jeans. All of them would go around barefoot because they were trying to be connected to nature. So the stores would just say, if you're not wearing shoes, then you can't come in. And that was their way of keeping out hippies. There.
Can I take my dad?
That's fine. Then, do we get to hot wiring with you guys?
No.
So I will leave it on that one.
Connor.
What'd you say?
Oh,
he's
thank
fine?
God.
Why's the pass
I thought it was
limited?
going to be.
Because it is. And from there.
Bye, Noah.
Bye, Noah.
You remember
See you
that?
soon.
And yes, because if you go, it'll take you down to Struggle Town.
I know.
Now,
I figured. Wait, if I'm working on 6 2 out of meetings, do I have to get a point for it?
I was sitting in our room.
you have to love it.
If I like want to like do my own
But it was a girl. What?
I don't know, right?
That's fine. So we are at the top of middle of page 15 with you guys. So we have not gotten to the hot wiring a car, which is just a moment.
Skip buddy.
What page are we
I
on?
wouldn't recommend.
I shouldn't be
Alright.
15.
Me, he's gonna hit you in the face if you do this.
Oh yeah, we had stopped where it said I'd lose my temper and kill one of those brats, but then Eminem never lost his temper. That's where we stopped with this class yesterday. My older sister, Kathy, you know. Yeah, I remember, I said, only I didn't remember too well. So, where's she been? Oh, she went to a private school last year in the summer. She's been staying with my aunt. She had to come home, though, because she ran out of money. She was paying for it all with her own bread. That's slang for
Money.
Money.
Figured you guys knew.
Cha-ching.
Yeah, I got a lot of bread.
Good
No,
job.
you know that's cat, bro. You need bread.
Must be smart, I said. I couldn't remember what she looked like. I'd never paid any attention to her. So, she as smart as you? No, Eminem said, still reading. He wasn't bragging. He was telling the truth. He was a very honest kid. Hey, let's go to the bowling alley, Mark suggested. The drugstore wasn't exactly jumping with action. It was a school night and nobody was hanging around. Why don't you come too, Eminem? It was a long walk to the bowling alley, and I wished for the 100th time I had a car. I had to walk everywhere I went. As if he'd read my mind, which he was in the habit of doing, Mark said, I could hotwire us a car. That's a bad thing to do, Eminem said. Taking something that doesn't belong to you. It ain't stealing, it's borrowing. Yeah, well, you're on probation now for borrowing, so I don't think that's such a great idea. Two things with it. You guys know what hot wiring is?
Yeah.
It's like hijacking. Yeah, I do that in GTA. Me too.
So, why would you need to hot wire?
It's still
So,
rob people.
normally it's when you don't have keys to a car, which is typically if you're in the process of stealing it, but not always. Like, my dad was a mechanic growing up, and so his car he drove when I was in junior high, he didn't have keys for it because he got it from a
What
junkyard.
type of car was that?
And so he always had to hotwire it every time, and he thought it was hilarious because it looked like he was always stealing his own car whenever he was driving somewhere. It just embarrassed me whenever we had to take my friends somewhere. But that's what hotwiring is. Mark doesn't steal them to try and sell them. He basically used them like a version of Uber. He would hotwire a car, drive around for the night, and then return it to the same place, put everything back up, and then go about his day. So he wasn't doing it to try and be bad. He just didn't want to have to walk. Oh, and then he got on probation. Do you guys know what probation is?
It's like next thing you do, you're out. You're in jail.
And so it's close. It's when you've already been in jail or in trouble, and it's where you have to every week check in with a police officer and basically report to see if you're going to keep getting in trouble or not. And sometimes you'll get drugged. If you've seen the people with the ankle braces, the monitors, that's not the same thing.
It's slow.
Yeah, that's house arrest. And so probation is not house arrest. You just have to check in every week.
My uncle's on probation. Free R.
I thought
Kelly.
when you hotwire a car, like, it can't turn on.
No, it can't be done. Just pull the wires apart.
Oh, because
Free R. Kelly to his back.
Mark could hotwire anything. And ever since he was 12 years old, he had hot-wired cars and driven them. Now, he never had an accident, but he finally got caught at it. So now, once a week, he had to go downtown on his school lunch hour to see his probation officer and tell him how he was never going to steal cars anymore. I'd been worried at first. I was afraid they were going to take Mark and put him in like a boys' home, since he wasn't really my brother and didn't have a family. I was worried about Mark being locked up. I mean, I didn't need to. Mark always came through everything untouched, unworried, and unaffected. Okay, Mark shrugged. Man, don't get shook, Brian. Brian, Eminem said suddenly, were you named after the Lord? What? I said, stunned. For a minute, I thought he meant God. Lord Brian, were you named after him? The poor kid had Byron and Brian mixed up. I decided to string him along. Yeah, I was. That's Lord Byron. He was a poet from a long time ago. Their names are just spelled similarly. Yeah, so was there a Lord Brian? Mark said. Hey, that's cool. Well, I guess it's cool. What'd this guy do anyway? Oh, I can't tell you in front of the kid. Eminem shook his head. Oh, he wrote poetry. He wrote long, old poems. You ought to write poetry, just to keep up the tradition of the Bryans. You ought to keep your mouth shut before I keep up the tradition of punching wise guys in the mouth. Eminem looked up at me, and I realized from his hurt, puzzled look that he wasn't trying to be a smart aleck. So I just punched him on the shoulder and said, okay, I'll write poetry. All right, how's this? And I recited a dirty limerick I'd heard somewhere. A limerick is a 5-line poem. Oftentimes people make them with dirty words in them because it makes people giggle. So just imagine a dirty word in there. And I recited a dirty limerick that I'd read at some point. Mark thought I'd made it up and said, hey, that was pretty good. So can you just pop them off like that? I only shrugged and said, sometimes, because then I could take credit whether or not it was really due me. I was like that. I'd also lie if I really thought I could get away with it, especially to girls, like telling them I loved them and junk when I didn't. I had a rep as a lady killer, a hustler. Nowadays, we would use the term
Andrew,
player. So a guy who just lies to women, all the time to get whatever he wants and thinks he's good looking. That's what Brian was. A pimp is a different thing. That's a whole different area. Not a thing we're getting into. I kept up the old Lord Byron tradition in one way. Sometimes I'd get to feeling bad, thinking about how rotten I treated some of these chicks, but most of the time, it didn't even bother me. Hey, Eminem, old buddy, Mark was saying, putting his arm across Eminem's shoulders. I was wondering if you might be able to loan your best friend some money. You ain't my best friend, Eminem said with that disarming honesty. But how much do you want? $3? I got 50 cents. Eminem reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a couple of quarters. Here, forget it, I said. Me and Mark looked at each other and shook our heads. Eminem was unbelievable. It's okay. I mean, I'll get 50 cents again next week for babysitting. Is that all you get paid for watching all those kids? 50 cents. I couldn't get over it. 50 cents a week. I think it's enough. I don't mind taking care of the kids. I mean, who's going to do it if I don't? Both my parents work, so they can't do it. Anyway, I like my family. When I get married, I'm going to have at least 9 or 10 kids. Well, there goes the population explosion. Well, now that your sister's home, she can do a lot of the babysitting, I said, trying to be helpful. Eminem could tell we thought he was crazy. Kathy's got a job after school. She can't help. I don't know what I have to do to convince you that I don't mind it. Okay. Yeah, I'm convinced. I was also tired of the subject, and I'd got to worrying about how we were going to get $3 before tomorrow. Charlie didn't get his rough rep or his bar by being nice to people, especially ones who couldn't pay their bills. By the time we got to the bowling alley, it was 10 o'clock. There weren't many people there. Mark and I watched a few games while Eminem stared into a package of M&Ms. I finally got bugged about it and asked him what in the Sam Hill was he doing. Take a look. He handed me the package, which was open at the top. Put it right up to your eye. I did. All I saw was a bunch of candy. It's beautiful, ain't it? Asked Eminem. I mean, look at all the different colors. Yeah, I agreed, thinking, if I didn't know this kid better, I'd swear he was high. Let me look, said Mark. So I handed him the package. Hey, yeah, this is groovy. I mean, look at all the colors. He gave the candy back to Eminem. He looked at me and just shrugged. Eminem got up. All right, I gotta go home now. I'll see you guys later. We just got here. Yeah, well, I just came along for the walk, and now I gotta go home. I watched him leave. That kid is weird, I said. That's all there is to it. Mark lit up a cigarette, our last one, so we had to pass it back and forth. I know, but I still get a kick out of him. Come on, let's go catch up with him. There ain't nothing to do around here. Outside, I spotted Eminem at the corner. There were 3 guys trailing him. When you see something like that around here, you know right away somebody's about to get jumped. In this case, it was Eminem. Come on, Mark said, and we cut through an alley so as to come up behind those guys. It was 3 against 3. Odds would have been even, except Eminem was one of those non-violent types who practiced what he preached, and me and Mark weren't carrying weapons. We slowed down to a walk when we came to the end of the alley, and I could hear the voices of the 3 guys who were following Eminem, and I recognized one of them. Hey, Flower Child, turn around! They were taunting him, but Eminem just kept right on moving. It's Shepard, Mark whispered to me. We were waiting at the end of the alley for them to come by. They didn't. They must have had Eminem up against the wall. We could hear them. We've heard the name Shepard before? So this is not Tim, though. This is going to be his younger brother. And remember, during the big rumble in Outsiders, Curly was the one who was in jail because apparently he kept getting in trouble with the police. That would be this kid here. Hey, hippie, don't you answer when you're spoken to? That ain't nice. Curly, why don't you just leave me alone? Eminem sounded very patient. I moved over to the other side of the alley, just in time to see Curly pull out a switchblade, reach over, and cut through the rawhide string on Eminem's piece metal. It fell to the ground. Eminem reached down to pick it up, and Curly brought his knee up sharply, and smashed Eminem in the face. Me and Mark looked at each other, and Mark flashed me a grin. We both liked fights. We ran out and jumped on him, and the one we didn't get took off, which was a wise thing for him to do. Since we'd surprised him, it wasn't too hard to get them pinned. I had Curly Shepherd in a stranglehold with one arm twisted behind his back, while Mark had the other guy pinned on the ground. "How would you like a broken arm, Shepherd?" I said through gritted teeth, careful not to loosen my grip. His switchblade had fallen on the sidewalk, but I didn't know what all he might be carrying. He liked to play rough. "Okay, you proved your point. Let us go, Douglas." That's Brian's last name, so big guy in the middle, Brian Douglas. Curly said a few more things that I'm not going to repeat. He must have figured out who it was twisting his arm when he saw Mark. Me and Mark, we are always together. Curly had a special grudge against me anyway. I used to go out with his sister. Now, she says that she broke up with me, which was the truth. But I was spreading around that I broke up with her and was giving all kinds of cool reasons. Curly was a little dumb. He belonged to a gang led by his brother Tim, known as the Shepherd Gang. Really original. Now, Tim, he was all right. At least he had a few brains, but I considered Curly a dumb hood. Look, we didn't hurt him. Now, that was a lie, because Eminem was sitting there against the wall, and already his cheek was swelling up and turning purple. He was trying to tie the ends of the rawhide string together, and his hands were shaking. "Let him go. I'm okay." I gave Curly's arm an extra twist for good measure, and then gave him a shove that almost sent him sprawling. Mark let the other guy up, but when he was almost to his feet, Mark gave him a good, swift kick. They left, cussing us out, partly in English and partly in sign language. If you don't know what it means to be cussed out in sign language, yeah, they're saying you're number one. And so that's
what does that mean?
Right there.
You're
number
one.
Definitely knows how to do that.
You're number one.
Oh!
Glad I could help.
Number one, gang.
I meant number one. That's all I meant.
Like this, like this, like this.
Totally like that. Oh no. Mark was helping Eminem up.
Oh, that's cool.
Come on, kid. Let's get you home. The whole side of Eminem's face was bruised, but he gave us one of those rare, wistful grins. "Thanks, you guys." Mark suddenly laughed. Hey, look what I got. He waved 3 $1 bills at me. "Where did you get that?" I asked, although I knew good and well where he got it. Mark was very quick, but nobody had to teach him how to hotwire a car or how to pick a pocket. It was a donation for the cause. Now, this was an old joke, but Eminem fell for it. "What cause?" "'Cause we owe it to Charlie," Mark said. And Eminem almost laughed, but instead winced with pain. I was really feeling good. I could quit worrying about Charlie beating us up. Mark suddenly poked me. Hey, you still in the mood for a little action?" "Sure," I said. Mark motioned towards the next intersection. There was a black guy standing there, waiting for the light to change. "Hey, we could go jump him," Mark said. Suddenly, Eminem spoke up. "You make me sick! You just rescued me from some guys who are going to beat me up because I'm different from them, and now you're going to beat up someone because he's different from you? You think I'm weird? Well, you're the weird ones!" Both Mark and I stopped walking and were staring at Eminem. He was really shook up. He was crying. I couldn't have been more stunned if he'd begun to dissolve. You don't see guys crying around here. Not unless they have a lot better reason than Eminem had. He suddenly took off, running, not looking back. I started to take a few steps after him, but Mark caught me by the arm. "Leave him alone," Mark said. "He's just all uptight from getting jumped." "Yeah," I said. That made sense. That had happened to me before. I could remember how scared it could get you. Besides, Eminem was only a kid. He had just turned 13. Mark picked something up off the ground. It was Eminem's peace medal. It must have dropped off when Eminem started running. He hadn't tied the ends of the string together very well. "Hey, remind me to tell him I have this," Mark said, stuffing the metal and the string in his pocket. "Let's stop by and give this $3 to Charlie before I buy some cigarettes with it." "Yeah, okay." I didn't feel quite as good as I had before. I was thinking about what Eminem had said about beating up people because they were different. There was a lot of truth to that. I mean, the rich kids in town used to drive around over in our part of the city and look for people to beat up. What's that a reference to? There you go. Then, like a year or so ago, a couple of kids got killed in that mess, and the fad slowly died out. That's a reference to?
Johnny.
And?
And Bob.
Bob was in nicely done. But, I mean, there were still gang fights around here and social club rumbles, and things like Shepard jumping Eminem happened every day. I didn't mind it much, unless I was the one getting mugged. I mean, I liked fights. "Come on," Mark called. "Maybe there's somebody to hustle in Charlie's." I grinned and ran to catch up with him. Mark was my best buddy, and I loved him like a brother. With that little reference, one, it gives a little shout out back to the Outsiders with the idea of the fact that them getting beat up at one point and the fact of them dying. And then here he talks about the fact that people are still getting beat up, which is going to be a thing throughout this book. We still have fights. We still have people getting beat up. It's just now no longer about the rich and the poor. One is like the hippies was a big part of it, where you had the Curly and these people would beat up hippies because they were different. And then you have the race issues, and be a part in this book also, where that was a big thing when this was going on about the two different races not getting along. And he was like, that's what Eminem's point is. Why? He's like, why are we fighting when we're all the same? There's no point fighting someone just because they're a little bit different. The reason you would fight them is because they're distracting you in class and causing all kinds of issues.
You took my phone.
Sorry, I was just...
Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Oh, we have our number 1. We're not finishing chapter 2 for tomorrow. I changed my mind on that. We are going to get to our little hippie, though. Ooh, you're going to know this hippie, by the way, in just a moment.
Eminem.
Different hippie.
A hippie drives.
The next afternoon, after school, Mark and me went downtown to the hospital to see my mother. She had just had this big operation. It was one that cost a lot of money. We had to sell our car, an old Chevy, our TV, a little black and white job, and anything else we could find to sell, but we were still short of money. I've been trying for weeks to find a job. Mark scrounged around and came up with some money. I didn't ask him where he got it. He didn't tell me, so I figured he stole it somewhere. Mark was really bad about stealing things. He stole things and sold them, or stole them and kept them, or stole things and just gave them away. It didn't bother me. He was just too smart to get caught. He'd been stealing things since he was 6 years old. I wasn't above taking a pack of cigarettes from a drugstore, but that was about it. I was the hustler, and Mark was the thief. We were a great pair. One thing about it, though, Mark couldn't see anything wrong with stealing stuff. I mean, I could. It didn't much matter to me whether or not Mark was a thief, but I still felt that stealing was wrong. At least, it's against the law. I think Mark was only dimly aware of that fact. Stealing was like a game to him, something to do for fun and profit. And he was careful not to get caught because, well, that was one of the rules. And that's going to be another theme throughout the book. Brian, big guy in the middle, he lies all the time. Lies to family, lies to girls. Mark, over there, is honest, never lies to anybody, but will steal anything you put down. You put something down, he'll just steal it, and he sort of just thinks it's part of what he does in life. So, that's how we lived. Stealing stuff and selling stuff. Trying to save money and eat at the same time. I never thought about it then, but I can see now. It was a pretty rough time for us. Anyway, Mark and I hitched a ride almost all the way to the hospital. The guy who gave us a ride was a hippie with long hair and a beard and a Volkswagen bus. That's what the Volkswagen bus is. Those buses are very big with hippies. I don't know why. The guy said his name was Randy and that he went to college in town, majoring in English. Why we know him?
Randy's the worst.
The one that didn't go to the rumble?
Who was best friends with?
Randy.
Bob.
And that was when he told Pony Boy like he doesn't want to fight anymore because fighting is wrong. What is it that hippies believe in?
Peace.
So there's where Randy comes back in. majoring in English. I figured he was a pretty brave guy. I mean, Mark and I looked like tough guys, the kind who go around jumping hippies, which we had done once before. We'd gone over to the city where the hippies hang out just to beat up somebody. I wouldn't do it again, though. I hadn't realized those guys refused to fight back. What happened to the one we got hold of made me sick. Mark felt the same way, so after that, we just left him alone. Randy was telling us about this really cool house where a bunch of his friends lived. It was an old house they all rented, and everybody who wanted to could live there and just groove in peace and goodwill. This was real common back in the 60s and 70s, where the hippies would sort of buy a house and they would paint it, and you could just sort of come and go and pay whatever money you wanted. It was all about like free love and getting along with people and happiness and stuff like that. Now, I didn't really believe him. There had to be a few sponges in a setup like that, and living with a bunch of people would get on my nerves, especially if they were hairy and dirty. But I was polite and said, sounds cool, even though it didn't particularly appeal to me. Mark was interested, though, and asked Randy all kinds of questions about where this place was and who all lived there, and if he knew about any other places like that. Mark was interested in lots of things. He knew all about the Old West and was nutty about Warner Brothers cartoons, so it didn't bug me when he got all excited about hippie living. That's, by the way, Warner Brothers cartoons. When we got out of the bus, Randy held up 2 fingers and said, "Peace." Mark held up Eminem's peace medal, which he was wearing around his neck as a joke, and made a wisecrack. Then we looked at each other and cracked up laughing, but we weren't being hateful. No, it was just funny. Well, Mom was glad to see us, but she hadn't been lacking for company. We had the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everybody else's business, and all the ladies came up to see her, at least 2 a day. They also brought me and Mark junk like pies and potato salad. I got the pies, and Mark took whatever else there was, since he couldn't stand sweet stuff. Cokes and an occasional M&M, just to be polite to M&M, was as much sweet stuff as he'd take. As a result, I was putting on weight. I wasn't in much danger of getting fat, since it seemed like I was growing an inch taller a week, and Mark was staying as slight and slender as ever. You would never guess Mark was as strong as he was by looking at him, but I knew from our wrestling matches that he was as tough as a piece of leather. As usual, the last thing on Mom's mind was herself. We had no more than got there and got hugged when she started telling us about this poor kid across the hall who never had anybody visiting him. "How do you know that?" I asked. "There's so many people coming and going around here. How do you know about some kid across the hall?" "The nurse told me." "Poor kid. He's not any older than you and Mark." I figured. I mean, her finding out about it. If there was a lame dog within 3 miles, she'd find it. It didn't bug me much, though. Thanks to her, I had a brother. I'm going to see if you guys remember a thing from way back during poetry.
Lame means cool.
Oh, you're close. So when it says lame, because we talk about the lame balloon man? No, that was queer.
Crippled.
Crippled. And so here when he says a lame dog, it just means like a hurt dog. And so his mom liked to like adopt any hurt animals in the neighborhood. We're going to stop there because we're getting to the next big part, and I want to save that for Monday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.